Okay, we're now on step 2 for switch 2. This time it's a little bit more involved because we're going to be doing something a little different here. If we look at this printout of the schematic for our power supply for the 3220-point breadboard project, you can see this on our website at mottbots.com underneath this project for this 3220-point breadboard project. But anyway, if we look here, we can see switch 2 in the schematic. In step 2 here for switch 2, we're still working with this green wire we just attached in step 1 for switch 2. What we want to do is we want to go about halfway down the wire. And what we're going to do is we're going to cut away about 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch of wire sheathing. We're going to cut it off, leaving a small section of wire exposed about the center of the wire. So the way I'm going to do that is I'll take a project knife, or aka an X-Acto knife, and again, like I said, we're going to remove a small section about center of the way down the wire. And the reason why we want to do this is because if we look at the schematic here on switch 2 for terminal 2, we can see that terminal 2 goes this way, and there's a connection point here from terminal 3 of switch 1 that connects to this wire, which is going to be this green wire here. And then the wire continues down and connects to this wire coming from terminal 5 of switch 2. So what I want to do is say that the green wire here, this wire coming from terminal 2 of switch 2, this is switch 2, I'm just going to say about halfway down the wire, I want to remove a small section of the wire to expose the wire in here so that later I can connect the wire coming from terminal 3 of switch 1, which I have switch 1 here that we set up before for terminal 3. That's this green wire here. And I'm going to eventually connect the end of this wire to that center point of this wire. So let me kind of guesstimate about center of the wire. And I'm going to make just as, I don't want to cut all the way through. I'm not pressing very hard. I'm just kind of making a guide cut for myself. You can't see it because it's so small. And I will kind of press with my thumb. I'm putting some pressure onto the wire to kind of make a cut just through the sheathing. I don't want to cut into the wire underneath. I'm just taking my time, constantly turning the wire around. I know you cannot see this at the moment, but I'm just adding pressure, taking my time, going around the wire, basically making a slit in the wire. And I think I may need a sharper blade than this. I'm going to use this one, see if that works better. I think it does. And once I'm satisfied with this, I'll move just a little bit down the wire, and I'll do the same thing. I just want to expose a little bit of the wire. And then what I'll do is I'll try to cut that little section out, making sure I'm being careful not to cut myself. And then I'll remove that section of sheathing. So you can see here, I'm going to spin it just a little bit. But you can see here that I have a section of that wire exposed here. And as I said, I want to take the wire from terminal 3. So I need to be sure that I'm getting terminal 3 here. Referring back to this diagram here, terminal 3 was here, and we had placed, if you remember, a ring connector on terminal 5. So my terminal 5 should have a ring connector, so I know this is terminal 5. So this shorter green wire must be my wire from terminal 3. And if I refer back to the steps for switch 1, when we were preparing switch 1 on step number 3, for switch 1, we did cut a 6-inch piece of wire and we attached it to terminal 3 of switch 1. So now I want to take this 6-inch length of wire for my switch 1 here on terminal 3, and I want to remove just a little bit of the sheathing from the end of the wire, just enough to expose it, maybe a little bit more than what I cut off. I'll make, actually I want to expose a little more than that, maybe about a 1/2 inch, maybe. Because what I want to do is I want to be able to wrap this end of wire around that section of wire that we split, and then we'll solder it all together. But first what I want to do is I want to take a piece of heat shrink tubing. I want to cut a section of this off because I don't need the whole thing. I'm going to cut, I don't know, about 1 inch or so of the heat shrink tubing. And what I want to do is I want to make a slice in this heat shrink tubing, not all the way through, but I just want to slice about 1/3 of the way down on this side along the length of the heat shrink tubing. So I'm going to eyeball about 1/3 of the way down. I'm just going to pierce it enough to get in. I'm not going all the way through, and I'm going to slice it, being careful. Let's try to set it down here. I'm not going all the way through. I'm just trying to slice this section open. Okay, that's all I want to do. I'm only cutting this section about 1/3 of the way down. I did not go all the way through to the other side, just this side, like so. And what I want to do is I want to take this piece of heat shrink tubing and I want to place it on the green wire that's on switch 2, the one that we have the exposed wire here in the middle. I want to slip it on the wire, the non-sliced end first. So here's my end that I slit open. I'm putting the other end first, and I want to slide it all the way down across that gap that we made, and just slide it all the way to the other end. Now I want to take another piece of heat shrink tubing and I want to cut or make a slice just like I did with the other piece, but I want to slice about 1/4 of the way down and I want to slice all the way through. So I'll go about 1/4 of the way down. Now I'm pressing harder, making sure I'm going all the way through to the other side. So that both sides have a slit through it. So now we can see that this piece of heat shrink tubing is sliced on both sides about 1/4 of the way down. And we want to take this piece of heat shrink tubing and put it on that green wire that's on terminal 3 of switch 1 that we have already prepared previously, and slide it over that wire, the non-slit end first. So where I cut it is on this end, and I'm just going to move it down all the way and get it out of the way for now. Now what I want to do is I want to solder the 6-inch length of wire on terminal 3 of switch 1. I want to solder that wire to that section that's exposed on the green wire on terminal 2 of switch 2. So I'm going to grab my helping hands, set it here. What I want to do is place switch 1 here. I think I want to put it here. And then I want to take switch 2. I'm going to place it here, I guess. Actually, I'll put it here and then I'll hold the wire with this one. I guess like so. So I'm taking the wire from terminal 3 of switch 1. I want to wrap it around the exposed section of wire on switch 1, the wire that's on, or sorry, the wire that's on switch 2, terminal 2. I just want to make sure that I'm wrapping it around pretty good, and then I'm going to come back and solder that together. Making sure that my 2 heat shrink tubes are on the wires and ready to go later. So let's see, I'm going to go in like this. Now I may end up melting some of the sheathing here because it's kind of a tight fit here, but that's okay. It's going to be covered up by the heat shrink tubing anyhow. Just need to solder it together. So now what I want to do is I want to slide the heat shrink tubing that's on the 6-inch length of green wire on switch 1, terminal 3, the one that we cut about a quarter of the way down and cut all the way through. And I want to push that piece of tubing, the heat shrink tubing, up to the T here, and I want it to slide all the way up and over. I don't know if you can see that, but let me remove that. So I've slid it all the way through. You can see that it's sticking past that T there. And I'm going to take the heat gun and I'll heat this heat shrink tube. And I'm just going to work my way around. And I'm going to clamp the end with my fingers here, because this heat shrink tube has that glue stuff that's inside that when it heats up, it kind of melts in there, and that glue within inside the heat shrink tubing really adheres to everything. So I just want to be sure that I clamp the end there to try to seal off the exposed T that we made here, the wiring and soldering. Okay, once that's good, we can take this other heat shrink tubing that we slid all the way down to this end of this green wire that's attached to terminal 2 of switch 2, where we made that slit in it about a third of the way down, but it doesn't go all the way through. And what I'll do, if I can, is I want to try to slip it over that T there, kind of like so. I might need to cut that end off a little bit. And slide that over the T. And I'll try to rotate this so you can see. So you can see that this tube goes over the T here. And I'm pushing the tube all the way to the end of the slit that we made. So the end of the slit's going to butt up into that T. And this whole section of the tube is going to cover that T. And then later we'll come back with another tube, heat shrink tube, and we'll come from this direction to help cover it all up. So now I'm going to take the heat gun and heat this section up. I want to use my fingers and kind of guide this part here to go down. Kind of wrap it over the best that I can. Doesn't have to be perfect. Just trying to cover it the best we can. Okay. Now I want to take another piece of heat shrink tube. I just need enough for the other side of the T that we don't have a piece of heat shrink tubing on. I'm going to slide it down. And I think what I want to do is probably cut about a quarter or a third of that piece. Actually, this one's a little longer. About a third down this piece, but not all the way through like we did for that section of heat shrink tubing. So I'm going to go about a third of the way, and I'm going to have to go off camera here, maybe. I don't want to cut myself, but I'm going about a third of the way and only slicing one side of the tube, not all the way through. Like this. Like that. Just this side, not all the way through. And now I will slip it over the T. This time I'm going the cut or slit side first. And I want to slide it up and over the T and try to push it all the way till the end of the slit butts up against the T. And then I'll take the heat gun again and heat this section of tubing. Okay. It's not perfectly sealed. Stuff's falling. It's not perfectly sealed, but it's better than having it exposed, and it's definitely better than using electrical tape, because I don't like using electrical tape. It's just not very good stuff, and it can be messy. So I think this heat shrink tubing will do better. So now we've taken our green wire about 6 inches or so. We attached it to terminal 2 of switch 2, and then we made our slice about midway down the wire in order to attach the 6-inch section of green wire that's attached to terminal 3 of switch 1. We teed that together, and then we protected all 3 sections coming into this T with this heat shrink tubing. So that was step 2 for switch 2, and the next step we have is step number 3 for switch 2 for our DIY 3220 point breadboard project.